Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom of our host, Dr. E. Emotional algebra with Dr. E.
Welcome to Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. Emotional Algebra is a podcast that helps listeners to understand the subtle calculations people make every day in their relationships with others and explores the known and unknown variables that affect interactions in our everyday lives. It's a podcast to help us all become better people through understanding the different variables that drive our behaviors. I'm your co-host, Andrew Tavani.
And I'm Dr. E.
Dr. E, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. It's
Yeah.
good to see you. We took a little hiatus there, a couple weeks off to spend time with family. So how was your holiday and
Holiday, I
beginning of the
cannot believe
year?
how fast it went, Dr. E. Isn't that always the case?
Absolutely.
It was nice, it was busy, it was good to see family and so forth. And it's all over, almost in a blink of an eye. How about yours?
Yeah, it was too quick. My daughter heads back to school. Actually, today we're driving her down to school, and it was too quick. And we get back into our old routines easy, which is I wish we had time in that time to maybe create some new routines with life changing and us seeing her a lot less. But we just kind of fallen back into those old routines. Which, speaking of a new year, it's time to potentially start some new habits. I'm ready to take emotional algebra to the next level with you and see how we can kick it into 2025 here. Well, quick story. On New Year's Eve, my wife and I were coming home from dinner out and dropped our daughter off at a party. And I drive in the driveway, and there's this small little bird on our driveway. And I'm looking at it closely, and it's not moving. The headlights shine on it, and I turn in, and I'm wanting to make sure the bird's okay. I wasn't sure if it was injured, and it was a dove at 10:30 at night sitting on our driveway.
Wow.
So I walk up to the dove, and I was going to see if it needed help, and then it just flew off. And looking at the significance first, what's the chance of seeing a dove at 10:30 at night? Birds tend to not fly at night. Doves don't tend to fly at night very much, and also on New Year's Eve. So I went to kind of look at some interpretations of what the significance of seeing a dove at on New Year's Eve at 10:30, and it seems to bode pretty well for the new year and the journey and opportunities for growth and great potential. So I thought that was an interesting journey into 2025 and where I hope to continue to take this year.
For sure. That's loaded with symbolism. Now, the other question
Absolutely.
is, did you make it to midnight or were you asleep when the ball dropped?
We made it to midnight and toasted to the new year coming in, and
There you go.
watched the. My wife loves to watch the New Year's Eve festivities and things on TV, and I watched some football. Then watched my Buckeyes go
Yes.
ahead and
Wow.
redefine the college playoff.
Unbelievable. I did not
Yeah,
watch that game, but I'm aware of the result. And
yep.
I don't think anyone saw that coming. Is that right? I'm not a huge college football fan, but I feel like
No,
that game was expected to be
it was a
closer.
duck hunt, as Elmer Fudd would say. So
Yeah.
it was a fun game, and we'll see what happens against Texas. And all
Yeah.
this will have been in the can for a while by the time this episode airs, but it's
Yeah.
been fun to
Well,
watch.
congratulations on that. Speaking, Dr. E, of taking things to the next level, I feel like we're really doing that today. We have another guest coming on, a very inspiring guest. Why don't you fill in the listeners and
Yeah,
viewers on who's joining us?
Chad Foster is joining us today. I had the fortune of meeting him through, again, life brings people to you, and I fully feel that way with him. I was doing a online uh, Zoom meeting years ago for a Harvard alumni group. And after that, there's a mental health program. The one of the directors for the Harvard Alumni Association says, "You know what? I think you need to meet this guy who lives in Atlanta, and I think you guys would get along great." And we have. But Chad is the only blind graduate of Harvard Business School. He has an amazing approach to life. He grew up most of his childhood and into young adulthood with sight, and lost his sight. And he'll share more of his story. But then he completed his education and went into business. Killed it in business. He also is quite an extraordinary person in the things he does, between skydiving and jujitsu, and still his continued business effort. He skis with a guide, and he defines what people can do with their life when they see what some people would see as obstacles, instead sees them as opportunities. And that's really one of the factors I want to bring out, and that we've wanted to bring through emotional algebra. So he is absolutely the best way to start off at least this calendar year our interviews, even though this will air a little yet later. But I feel pretty honored to have met him, and to call him a friend, and to now have him as part of the show. So let's
Absolutely.
go
And
ahead and
yeah,
bring him
we'll
on.
bring him in. We should also mention he is the author of a book called Blind Ambition. So
Absolutely.
here
And
he
an
is.
international speaker, also keynote
That's right.
speaker.
Motivational speaker. So here he is,
Yeah.
Chad Foster. Welcome to Emotional
Gentlemen,
Algebra with Dr.
how's it
E.
going? Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Well, thanks
Thank
for
you for
being here,
coming
Chad.
on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look forward to the conversation.
Yep.
Wish I could say I had better news about the college playoff, Dr. E. Unfortunately, your Buckeyes knocked my Volunteers out. We got humbled. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, we're used to that. Unfortunately, over the last 15, 20 years, we've been rebuilding the program. Not quite back to where it needs to be, but we're on the right path, and hopefully we can keep making progress. But certainly we got a big dose of humble pie this year in Ohio when we went to Columbus. So it is what it is. I hate it. But you know, you guys outplayed us. You guys blew the doors off of us. And fortunately for me that night, we had a holiday party, and I didn't have to watch all of the massacre that took place that evening, which would have been hard to stomach. So I instead, you know, was with friends and family, and that helped to soothe the pain a little bit of the loss.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been through a couple of those humble pie experiences too, as a Buckeye fan for life. So right there with you, man.
It happens.
So yeah. So want to again love to dive in and find out more about you, and obviously we'll kind of touch up with the emotional algebra that you've experienced through your life and how you've managed it. But like I said, to me, you are a definition of resilience and perseverance, and making medicine from suffering, as I say, you know, as in this
Yeah,
from the Zen, borrowing from Zen.
appreciate
So
that.
tell us a little bit about, you know, what it was like growing up, and your environment and background, and then how you kind of moved into, you know, what happened that resulted in your loss of sight.
Lived a
I should say loss of vision, not loss of sight, because you definitely are very well sighted.
Thank you. I lived a pretty active lifestyle growing up. I was, you know, I played sports, I played football, played basketball, played soccer. I drove a car, I rode bicycles and motorcycles and all those things, but I did have problems seeing in dark areas. And so when I was just over 3 years old, my parents noticed I was having problems tripping over things in really dark rooms. And so they took me to Duke University Medical Center, where I was diagnosed with an inherited eye condition known as retinitis pigmentosa. And the doctors told my parents they should, you know, be prepared at some point. I very likely could go totally blind, and that they should take me home and enroll me in a special school for the blind, and take really close care of me, because things were going to be really difficult for me. And my parents listened to that advice and drove home, and instead they decided that rather than sign me up for a special school for the blind, they decided to sign me up for soccer.
Hmm.
And they didn't want me to feel any different than anybody else because of what could happen. They didn't want to expect anything less of me, or different than other folks. And so they, you know, in some ways, I would even venture to say they held me to a little bit of a higher standard, because they knew life was going to be harder for me than it was my brother, who could see just fine. And so they expected, a lot of effort. My dad was sort of old school, expected a lot of work around the house. He was raised on a farm, and so we had a lot of things to do all the time. And like I said, I played sports, I drove a car, and then when I was in college at the University of Tennessee, where I did my undergraduate work at 21 years old, basically it was a bit of a process, but at 21 was the moment that I realized that life as I had known it was coming to an end. I lost my eyesight. In one of my literature classes, I couldn't see to read the words on the page. And it was a pretty tough time, realizing that everything that I'd been warned about and had really disregarded, didn't think it would happen to me, because I was 14 years old. I was told by one of the leading specialists in the Southeast for retinitis pigmentosa, hey, look, most people who have your eye condition aren't riding jet skis. They're not riding motorcycles. It's possible that you've got something else rather than what the folks at Duke told you. So I took that as maybe a little bit of delusional thinking. I thought, well, maybe I can outrun this thing. Maybe it's really not me. And so I just sort of pretended or acted like everything was going to be fine. And when I was 21 years old and the curtain dropped and I realized I was heading into darkness forever, that was a pretty tough time for me. And so that's when, I had to get a medical withdrawal from my major. I wanted to go into the medical field because I wanted to help other people. And then after I went blind, I wasn't even sure if I was going to help myself. So it's a pretty difficult time up until that point.
So what was that like emotionally?
It was like having a death in the family, except the death was my imagined future self. There was a lot of mourning that took place during that time, a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of despair, a lot of hopelessness. We ask kids all the time what they want to be when they grow up. And guess what? You're not going to be surprised by this, but none of them, and I mean none of them, say they want to be a blind person. So it was very jarring, because again, I had been, kind of acting like everything was going to be okay, hoping things would be okay, that I was going to be able to outflank this eye disease, and almost kind of pretending, using wishful thinking, almost pretending to be somebody I was not, and very hopeful. And I've always been a bit optimistic, but at that point, all the optimism went out the window, and there was a lot of sadness and a lot of despair and just a lot of trauma. Up until that point, my life had been already very uncomfortable. And one of my pillars of resilience that I teach today is get comfortable with discomfort. And I think that's probably why I've been able to get through life as productively as I have, is because my life has been an experiment of being uncomfortable, growing up and not being able to know the limitations of my eyesight. I would find out that something is there that I can't see by running into it. So for example, I was 6 or 7 years old and I was on the farm helping my parents, and it was dusk and couldn't see that well. Didn't realize that I couldn't see that well. And my brother and I jump off of this wagon that's going up to the barn, and we're running down the driveway to the farmhouse. And I didn't see that there was a water truck there with a water pipe off the back of it. And I hit that water pipe full speed, split my head wide open. Oof. I had to get rushed to the ER with a police escort, lost a lot of blood. And those sorts of things happen so much to me. Broken legs and stitches, concussions, all these things. They actually questioned my parents and I in separate rooms because they thought my parents were abusing me. And the truth is, I was just learning the limitations of my eyesight through the only means I knew how, which was by bumping into things. And so that was physically uncomfortable. And then in high school, I had the social discomfort of not being able to drive a car at night like everybody else, or not being able to play football at night under the lights like I wanted to. And so there was the social discomfort. And then going blind at 21 years old and experiencing the emotional discomfort that of, having to let go of who I wanted to be when I grew up, realizing that I couldn't be, in the medical field that I'd wanted to do for so long in service of other people. And then even after I got my first guide dog, I came back and, my attitude completely changed. But here I am walking into every university classroom and job interview and boardroom, and everywhere I went, I'm with a 100-pound German Shepherd. And that was uncomfortable at first, but it was actually a real gift to me because it forced me to embrace the very thing that I'd been hiding from, I've been running from. It forced me to be unapologetically authentic to who I am. You're not hiding that German Shepherd, so you've got to own it. And it forced me to not only own, the fact that I was walking around with a dog, but more importantly, it forced me to own my eyesight limitation. It forced me to not make excuses and to just take ownership of who I am, imperfections and all.
So how do you think that those situations early on, like you said, you bumped into a lot of things. How do you think that affected your approach to resilience now, kind of prepared you for the rest of your life, emotionally, belief wise, spiritually, even?
Well, I think it toughens you up. When something like that happens to you, you have two choices. You can either throw in the towel or you can keep going. I chose to keep going. And I started learning through those small bumps and bruises, and some of them bigger than others. But I started learning that I was tougher than I thought. I was capable of more than I thought, and I could recover from things. And, I was always learning in those moments. And it's similar to many of us today, right? A lot of us maybe try to avoid failure, setbacks, but it's those setbacks that are really learning opportunities. And so I started learning at an early age that, bumping into something wasn't a cataclysmic failure. Hopefully I recovered from it, but as long as I did, what can I learn from it? How do I adjust my behavior patterns? How do I not put myself in those situations again and make sure that I manage the situation accordingly? So it taught me at a very early age that, you have to pick yourself up off the floor, but don't make the same mistake twice. Because for me, if I'd made the same mistake twice, I could end up getting killed. There were times when I had some really close near-death experiences. One time I was walking down the road to get a hamburger one evening, and I fell into a 15-foot drainage ditch. Barely managed to pull myself out of that. Had to go to the ER. Was on crutches for a few months. I bruised my thigh. And another time a few times, but one time in particular, I'll never forget. The last time I ever drove a car, I was about 20 years old, and I was driving on Cumberland Avenue, which is the main drag on Tennessee campus there in Knoxville, and the sun's bright glare was blinding me from seeing the road in front of me. I was driving 50 miles per hour, and 4 or 5 seconds, I can't see anything, literally nothing. And, 1 or 2 seconds is one thing, but I'm hitting like 4 or 5 seconds, and I'm shaking, I'm trembling, I'm sweating. And at the last possible moment, I got a glimpse of an opening in the center of the road and just whipped my car over and barely avoided a car accident. So another near-death experience. And that was the last time that I drove. I called a friend of mine to come pick me up, and I never got behind the wheel again. But with the stakes being so high in my situation, you can't really afford to make the same mistake twice because it could cost you your life.
Wow. Chad, that's fascinating. I wanted to go back to something you said about feeling like a death in the family had occurred when you lost your vision at 21, and you talked about mourning. I'm wondering how long that mourning period lasted for you until you were able to, take the next step and start, taking ownership of what was really a new life for you.
Well, it lasted longer than I'd like to say. I mean, I wish I could tell you it was a week or two. It was several months. And the next step, I made the next step in several months, but I'd love to tell you that in several months, everything was fine. I shook it off, and but it was longer than that for me to get to where I'm at today. And there was a moment in my life that really reshaped everything. I still had a bit of that victim mentality. I was 23 years old. I'm rolling in to get my first guide dog and leader dogs for the blind. And I come in there, and got this poor me mentality. like, this sucks. I can't believe I've got to come get a seeing eye dog or whatever. And none of my friends have to do this. They can all see and drive, and life's not fair. And I was there and had the opportunity to meet some incredible people. I was there and I was getting a guide dog in partnership with some of my peers there were getting dogs, but they were facing way more than I could imagine. Some of them were on dialysis, so they had to go to dialysis every week because they had diabetes on top of being blind. In fact, the diabetes is what robbed them of their eyesight. There were some folks there who had mental impairments on top of being blind, so multiple disabilities. And there were these girls there whom I'll never forget, and these girls were deaf and blind. Yet they were getting a dog to be independent. Now, look, it's one thing when you just meet someone on the street and you hear how rough they have it, but it's another thing altogether when you live with someone and you see their challenges firsthand for an entire month. The true meaning of perspective gets seared in your memory. So that was a real tipping point for me. At that point in my life, I realized that we don't have to be defined by what we lack, but it's the things that we have that we all very naturally take for granted. I had taken my sight for granted until I couldn't. I was still taking my mental faculties for granted. I was still taking my hearing for granted, none of which some of these people had. They didn't have that luxury. And how many of us stop to think like, wow, I was born in the wealthiest country on earth, the land of opportunity. I was born into a family that's supportive. Oh, I was born at a time we're sitting at the dawn of the information age. It's going to create opportunities for a services-based economy. I'm a blind guy. I'm probably not going to make the best field worker, right? There's things that I just can't do physically. So there were opportunities for me learning how to use a computer, which became obviously my portal to the world. But there were so many things in my life and that in all of our lives that we take for granted. So many things that you take for granted. It's just natural. It's how we are as humans. And so that's why at my house, ever since we've had kids, starting 16 years ago, we have a nighttime gratitude session where we all have to go around and share 3 unique things that we're thankful for that day, because it's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness. It helps us create the muscle memory to remember all the little things that we all, unfortunately, as humans, can very naturally take for granted.
Excellent. So it sounds like, going back to your story, that, your parents really helped define your path by not feeling sorry for your circumstance and overcoming. They said, no, here it comes, and you're going to be ready for it. And we're not going to go light on you, because it's like they saw it as an opportunity to help you to adapt to challenges in life, and almost, I always say, turn obstacles into opportunities.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. My dad was, like I said, a bit old fashioned in that regard. And so he would do things like, I had a lot of responsibilities around the house, and he expected more of me. And so when it was time to trim the yard and I went to go grab the weed trimmer, he's like, no, I want you to use these lawn scissors. And he would hand me the lawn scissors. And there was a lot of, I was like, what, really? I've got to use lawn scissors. But I think if I have to put myself in his shoes, what he was probably doing was trying to prepare me for the road ahead, knowing that my path was going to be harder than the path of someone who could see, and knowing that I would have to put in more work than someone who could see just to have a shot. And so when I went blind at 21, and I went into the workforce at 25, and I had to learn how to write code to engineer my software just to be able to do my job without being able to see my computer screen, I had the work ethic and the determination to do it. So I figured out how to write code to engineer my software, even though I couldn't see my screen. I started off doing it for myself. I got so good at it that I started a business. And, several years later, I was writing some code for a friend of mine from Anderson Consulting, one of his clients. And come to find out, Oracle, who owned that application, had been going around telling everybody that it wasn't possible to make it usable for the blind. And I got on a call with the Oracle rep and the rep for the manufacturer of the software product, and said, well, actually it is. I've got a client who's been using it for the last couple of years, had him on the call. And next thing you know, Oracle's referring me business, because I was the only person in the world who was known to be able to do that, and ended up getting called to testify in a court case as a result of it. And so, that obstacle of not being able to see and not being able to use all the technology in the workforce, custom enterprise software, I flipped that into an opportunity to create a consulting business and ended up working out pretty well. My wife used to think I was playing on the computer. She'd come in there and ask me if I was playing on the computer and kind of having fun with it. Like, no, I'm learning how to write code and this is going to make us money. And she thought, yeah, sure it is. Sure it is. And then the checks started arriving. We bought our first vacation home. And then she comes by and she's like, can I get you some coffee? Is there anything I can get for you? You just keep doing what you're doing.
You know what I love about the story of you meeting your wife and who she is as a person is that she was intrigued by the way you approach situations and even the challenges you had and was looking forward, almost it seems like, to getting to know more about you and what made you who you were, rather than just meeting somebody else in a bar somewhere else. It seemed like she was attracted to your uniqueness.
Yeah, she was. And I was attracted to her uniqueness too. At that point in my life, I was 26 years old when we met. We've been together for over 23 years. And a lot of people would see my dog, handsome German Shepherd dog. My friends in college wanted to change the name of my dog from Miles to Magnet because he was a magnet for attention. People would want to come up and talk to him, oftentimes females. And it was interesting and fun for a little while, but it kind of got old. It's like, oh, I get this. I see this playbook. You see me and you want to talk to me and you use the dog. It's the easy icebreaker, a little bit of a layup. And so when I met my wife in Atlanta, she comes up, all right, my buddy's talking to her. He steps away. I start talking. And for an hour or two, we're talking and she doesn't say one word about the dog, nothing about the dog. And I'm sitting there wondering to myself, wait, is she blind too? Like, clearly she can see this 100-pound German Shepherd by my feet, but she's not saying anything about it. And so it told me that she was different, like you said, Dr. E, she was trying to get to know me on a deeper level. And I was really impressed with her. A 26-year-old young lady had moved to the United States from Brazil without family, without friends, without a support network, without being able to speak the language fluently. She could speak some, but, not great. And to do that as a young female, in an environment that isn't always the most conducive for young females to be in that situation, it told me that she had some guts. She had some courage. She was bold. She was adventurous. And those are qualities that I like to think I also had. So it kind of told me that we were cut from a very similar cloth.
Mm-hmm. Great story. Great story. And I think why I bring these pieces out, like I said, is a lot of times when people get into situations that we talked about, we have what people might see as disabilities. It's not, it's all how we see it and it's what we do with it. And I think in this, there might be a lot of people who could get in that place. Well, who's going to love me because I have this problem or that problem and this? And to me, it's do you love yourself enough to invest in yourself and to do something with your life that defies the odds? And, in many ways, since Wicked, it's defying gravity, in that way. And I think that's the way I want to help people to look at life, and even seeing our emotional challenges that we might have and how we view sadness and shame and failure and grief, and not seeing those as things that weight us down, but instead things we can dive into and learn from, so that ultimately they lift us up, just as you did through your grieving process, that when you lost your sight and all these issues, you got back up. You didn't let it stop you. And that, to me, again, it defines greatness. I think when we had our discussion with a political, we had a discussion with a woman who wrote an article about canceling Thanksgiving and Christmas because of the election results. And through that, what I talked about in political discourse is that we're not defined by our greatness, isn't defined by our wins, by how we do when we win. It's defined by how we manage our wins and perceived losses and what we do with them and grow from them in there. And that's where
absolutely. I see it. And you know this far better than I, but without the feeling, the emotion of sadness, how do we know what happiness feels like?
Exactly.
Exactly. If everything is happy every day, we become numb to it. We don't even know what it is. And so it's the range of emotions that makes us appreciate the other things. Without the sting of a loss, how do we really appreciate the win? And so I've learned that firsthand through what I've been through. And certainly, I think it's important to know, if we're talking about failures and those sorts of things, where are the edges of possibility? And how do I expand those edges? And how do I redefine what's possible? And I love what you said about loving people's selves. You have to love yourself. I now realize, how blindness has helped me. I'm a better person today because of my blindness, not in spite of it. It's helped me in so many ways. It's helped me to be a better listener. It's helped me to be a better communicator. It's helped me to be, someone who doesn't judge other people based on surface level appearances. It's helped me in the corporate world, be a better technologist, because I was dependent on the technology to use my computer. So I became a more skilled technologist. I was able to structure better technology deals when I was leading the deal desk at Red Hat, or when I was leading the pricing strategy and solutions organization at SRA, where we were going after these large government programs. I understood the technology deals that I was constructing better because I was so dependent on technology myself, and I had the curious and analytical mind that I was forced to have because of my blindness. And so every obstacle comes with its benefits. I now realize that for me, the work that I get to do, empowering people to bounce back from their own setbacks by teaching them the anatomy of resilience, it's made this blindness for me. It was this beautiful gift that came disguised in some really ugly wrapping paper. And today, if you'd offer me the chance to be able to see again, if I couldn't continue to help people in the way that I am today, I'm not sure I'd be able to take it. And bear in mind, I've never seen my wife. I will never see my kids with my eyes unless some miracle happens. So I don't make that statement very lightly, but the impact I'm able to create by helping people does make going blind worth it in some bizarre sort of way, because I'm now multiplying the impact on other people, so they don't have to go through what I've gone through to learn what I've learned. And, I'm in front of tens of thousands of people every year, empowering them with what I've learned. And it's just so enriching and so nourishing to be able to do that, to have that kind of impact on people's lives so that they can live their happiest, most successful lives. And none of that would be possible had I not gone blind.
Chad, you talked about expanding the edges of what you can do. I think the story you told about learning to code is certainly one of those things. You've really expanded what maybe many people believe a blind person is capable of doing. You're out there skiing, skydiving, practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Talk about how you took the leap to expand to those levels.
Well, I think I was looking for more discomfort in my life, because as I mentioned earlier, my life has been so uncomfortable. You do things like grow up and then go blind, and all the social discomfort, physical discomfort, emotional discomfort. And then I was traveling the world with my seeing eye dog, going to places like Shanghai and Singapore and Japan and all over Europe, not being able to see, but still getting up at 5 a.m. for my morning workout routine, finding my way to the hotel gym, feeling my way around all the machinery in the gym just so I could get my workout in. And I kept looking for ways to expand discomfort for me, because I knew with the discomfort, I was experiencing growth. And so I then got into, at 38 years old, decided that, skiing sounds like it could be a viable option. A buddy of mine gave me a call and told me that he had a business partner. He was out there skiing with him in Colorado, and there was a adaptive ski program out there, and he said he thought it was possible. And admittedly, my first reaction was not great. Like, hey, that doesn't sound like a very safe idea. Blind guy going down a mountain 50, 60 miles an hour. That just doesn't sound like a wise idea. I did a little research into it, found out that, they actually have some highly trained professional instructors out there, and they have a system for managing the risk, and it involves Bluetooth communications equipment. We're mic'd up. We wear earpieces. Obviously, they introduce you to different terrain based on your skill level. I started at the very beginning, 38 years old, had never put on bindings myself before in my life. And the process of learning involved a lot of falling. It was a lot of falling and picking myself up and doing that over and over and over again. But now I've gotten to the point where I'll do black and sometimes double black diamonds. And so we like to have fun with it. We let it rip every now and then. And now I've got the kids into it and wife, and so we all go, and it's a great bonding experience. But I wanted something else to do with the kids, because a lot of parents are able to spend time with their kids doing some activity, teaching them how to shoot a basketball or kick a soccer ball. And I'm not the best person to teach them how to play catch. The last time I tried to play catch, I got a black eye and a bruised ego. So I had to figure out plan B for me. So what am I going to do that's active with my kids, that's accessible for me? And so that's when we found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and went in there to really learn how to spend time with my kids and maybe teach them how to defend themselves, but ended up learning so much more than just how to defend myself and how to teach them how to defend themselves, because it really is a great metaphor for life. I don't know of anything in life that teaches you the value of getting comfortable with discomfort more than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because the first time you get on the mat, it's pretty terrifying. That it's probably not going to end well. Black belt puts you in a chokehold. There's no way out. What do? Well, most people like me, they panic. The adrenaline spikes, breathing gets out of control. You start trying to strength your way out of the situation, and that's not really helpful. That's not really the right way to go about it. But over time, what you learn is you learn to move towards the fear. Fear is not something you move away from. It's something you move towards. And fear is the direction of travel. And why is that? Well, when you move towards the fear, it can't control you anymore. It doesn't dominate your thinking. It doesn't dominate your emotions. And so you learn to settle into the terror. You learn to lay down in the fear. You learn to get really comfortable in the thing that you had previously feared so much. So instead of panicking and having your adrenaline take over, you learn to control your breathing, to bring your heart rate down, to step through that fear, stay relaxed, and start calmly looking for a way out. And ironically, oftentimes, those seemingly inescapable chokeholds actually do have a way out, if you can just stay calm enough to look for them. And that's not just on the mat training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's everywhere in life. Maybe something in your personal life or something at work feels like it has you in a chokehold and you don't feel like you can get out of it. But if you get comfortable with discomfort, you can learn how to slow things down, how to stay calm, how to stay relaxed, how to expand your edges, and find new and creative ways of getting out of those bad situations.
And I think in that you bring up awesome points about what I do teach about fear too, is if we look at fear from hierarchical, like it's bad and wrong and weak is how we see it in our culture. If we look at fear from an equity space, it's there to let us know when we might need to do something to protect ourselves. For you, you're letting it give you feedback to say, hey, how do I protect myself? How do I do this? And in that almost slowing everything down. And when we slow things down and we become internal, we say, how is this happening for me? What is this emotion trying to do for me, to show me, to help teach me? Then you do start to embrace those emotions. And I think that's the hard thing, is for so many, and I think that's what life brought to you, is you kept being exposed to these emotions of failure that tells us when it's time to learn, that you could have seen and just, you could have said, I quit. And you said, I accept the challenge. Shame that, that says it's time to love yourself again, rather than there's something wrong with you. Guilt when you do something to somebody else that you can learn from to do better. And then like you said, gratitude brings you happiness. I love that, because you have gratitude for so many more things, because you feel like you've had, and it's not that you see what you did as loss, it's that you see it as a gain, because you see inside of people. You see through things that other people see as walls and barriers. You see ways around things, because your journey has been, to me, in many ways, to master emotions, not to let them control you. And I always teach that the need for control is based in fear. And, before we started the show, we were talking about jujitsu and how you were describing how you could tell your daughter she was leaning forward or leaning back just by feel. And, we kind of brought that back to that idea of emotional algebra and understanding all the variables, because even there, you're looking at the algebra of jujitsu, the math of how you affect gravity, position, form, balance. All these pieces come together. And that's the same thing we're doing in life. And if we're not aware of the variables of all the emotions in life and our beliefs, our attitudes, our perceptions, and how they moderate those variables, we'll never get to the outcomes that we're seeking. The math won't work. And to me, you've been a master at understanding the math and making it work.
Been very fortunate, and very fortunate to have found something that I think embodies a whole lot more than just a fighting system. It's a way of being. From my point of view, it's not something that I do anymore. In fact, in many ways, jujitsu has kind of been the metaphor of my life. It's been hard. It's been consistent, showing up every day, doing the hard work. It's been uncomfortable. I've grown by doing the hard work. You don't get great at jujitsu overnight. If you think you're going to be great, you show up for a week or two, you're going to get a big dose of humble pie. Because I don't care how talented you are, how strong you are, how athletic you are, flexible, any of those things. When you get on the mat with somebody who's trained, your ego will get checked at the door. There's no option there because they're trained. They put in more work. They've just put in the work and they understand the martial art. And I think we live in a society today that seems to prize instant gratification at every turn, whether it's overnight shipping, it's a viral video sensation, it's I want to be a 25-year-old CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. That's not really how life and greatness and fulfillment and rewarding work take place. I think it happens with consistently showing up, doing the hard work, checking your ego at the door, having a learning mindset, realizing that in jiu-jitsu, when we train, if we try to win every time we go out, then we're not going to be learning as much because you're not going to experiment with new techniques. And so you have to check your ego at the door and say, you know what, I want to learn this new position. In order to do that, I'm probably going to lose a lot at first. But by checking the ego at the door, you have that beginner's mind, that learning mindset that understands, hey, look, learning eventually does lead to winning. But in the process of doing that, I need to be humble and accept the fact that I'll be losing a lot. And that's why a lot of people don't stick with jiu-jitsu, because it's very humbling. There's a lot of losing up front. It's very front loaded to losing. And some folks can't handle that. The people who do, the people you train with, and this is kind of paradoxical, I think, as you would think, at least I did going in, that, oh, I'm going in here and training with these trained killers and this is what they do. And they're probably very aggressive and very mean and just want to dominate. And it's actually quite the opposite of that. Most of the people in there, they've gone through the humility journey. They're not out there to hurt anybody. They're trying to build you up too. It's a community, it's a supportive community where everybody understands nobody ever got their black belt by themselves. They all started at the beginning. And it's really about building up a community of people who can lift one another up by teaching them the values, the principles, the techniques, the mindset shifts. It's not about dominating. It really is about supporting and growing with one another, because we realize that as we train and we're getting better, everybody around us is getting better too. And so we learn to not measure ourselves against everybody else, which is so common in the society we live in today, this comparisonitis culture that we live in, where everybody's looking at everybody's Instagram feeds or YouTube videos or whatever, and looking at pictures of the best parts of their lives. Instead of comparing ourselves to that, we should be comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday. And that really is where jiu-jitsu comes in. If I'm comparing myself to all the people around me who've been training for longer than me, it's probably going to be disappointing. But what I have to look at is, where was I at 6 months ago? Where was I at 2 years ago? How far have I come? I'm really on my own journey, and hopefully, everybody is on their own journey. And I wish we could learn that more as a society. Is it's not about how you stack up to other people. It's about how you stack up to who you were yesterday. And for me, a big part of that is getting into that growth mindset of, how do I push myself further and further out of my comfort zone so that my comfort zone expands. And the best way I know to do that is continue doing what I'm doing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because after you get used to that, you get comfortable with the discomfort you experience training. All the other discomforts in life seem to pale in comparison.
Again, you are a gift and a blessing to know, brother. I love to hear your story and what
Thank
you've
you,
done
man.
with it, and what you're doing in your work around the world, and all this speaking that you're doing. I also love the relationship you've had with your dogs, and the
Yeah.
love that you have for them, the love they have for you. And to me, a lot of this, and to get back to a quick story, and is you didn't tell the story in here, but I know the story about you skiing with your guide, and he was talking to somebody else while you were skiing, and was
Yeah.
telling them to go one way when you should have turned the other, and him catching it at the last second, right as you were about to really hit head on into the tree and hit the glancing blow. But in that, what I wanted to bring out through that story, and what I
Mm,
wanted to bring out about you, is you've had to learn to trust people so much in some areas of your life, and even more,
yeah.
you've had to learn to trust yourself and your limitations. And
Yeah.
even when those people you felt might have let you down, the people it sounds like you surround yourself have owned their mistakes. The people that you continue to surround yourself, I will say, own their
Yeah.
mistakes. They
Yeah.
help you get up with them, you reestablish a trust, and you
Yeah.
keep going. And to me, that's such a hard thing for people to do, is once they feel like trust has been compromised, they don't want to trust again. Can you just give a little summary of kind of those experiences and interdependence and trust for you?
Oh, it's crucial. I don't think any of us could ever accomplish anything significant in our lives alone. So if you think that you can accomplish what you want in your life alone, you're wrong. Full stop. It's not possible. You have to find
Mhm.
a team of people, whether that's your family, your spouse. We all need a support system. Your friends, colleagues. It starts with trust, and people are going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. The question is, can I own those mistakes to correct it so that it doesn't happen again? And yeah, the incident you mentioned, yeah, my buddy and I were skiing and we're on this easy run, and it's a little easy groomer blue, and his wife is there skiing. And so she can't really ski what we normally ski. So it's like they say, most car accidents happen 2 miles from your house because it's the easy road. You kind of check out. That's what happened. He checked out a little bit and was kind of taking it easy because it wasn't challenging terrain at all. And he's talking to somebody as we're coming to their side. And he's like, "Oh, we're coming to your left." And all I heard was left. And so what did I do? I made a left into a tree at 20 miles an hour. And it was pretty horrific. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to walk away from it. I barely did. I was very fortunate to make it out of it. But we looked at the video. We had filmed everything,
Mhm.
and we had the GoPro, and we sit back and we look at it and we're like, well, that's a pretty correctable mistake. It's like, I know you didn't do it on purpose. You kind of got complacent because we were, going down this easy slope. But hey, I need you to not ever use the words left or right with anybody else other than me. Those are holy words reserved for me. Don't use those with anybody else. All right, peace, got it, check. And so at that point, I knew what I had to do was get back out on the mountain the very next day. And
Mhm.
my leg was a little bruised. It took some ibuprofen and, hot tub and ice and that sort of thing. But I knew I needed to get back out there as quickly as I could, because if I didn't, the feelings of anxiety would fester. And I didn't want that to happen. So I wanted to beat that. And so we went out the very next day and we did, and I didn't ski a hard day. That wasn't the point. The point was to go and have, I wasn't trying to get 20,000 feet of elevation skied in. It was just to get back on the horse. I needed to get back on the horse and not let the fear consume me. Because if I had sat on it for too long, it could have, because it was a close call. And so it was just understanding that, you know what, his track record is really, really good. He made a mistake that anybody can make, getting complacent. And so we have to manage it, move forward, and, correct it. And so we saw something that was correctable and step forward through that. And, I won't be second guessing it. Like, it's just one of those things. A mistake happens. And once you address it, you have to let it go and move on. And the way that I knew to let it go as quickly as possible, like I said, was to get back on that horse as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing, Chad, that you can do that. And it sounds like you have a capacity to overcome fear, maybe more than most people do. So I'm wondering, I know we got to wrap it up. We're running short on time, but I'm just wondering, in all your public speaking and so forth, when you're talking to people who maybe aren't facing challenges that you faced, what do you tell them? What do you advise them about overcoming fear, taking that first step to overcome fear and expand your edges, as you say?
Well, anytime you're facing fear, there's a counter fear. And so fear always has its counterpart. And so for me, when I was moving to Atlanta to get my first job out of college, I was scared. I was scared the fact that I'd never lived in Atlanta. I didn't have family there. I didn't have a support system. I didn't know how to do my job. I had to learn a new highly technical job. I had to learn the bus and train system without being able to see. I had to learn how to travel all over the United States every week for my consulting job, new airports, new client sites, new hotels. I'd just gone blind a year earlier, got my guide dog a year earlier. So I was terrified. People would ask me if I was excited. And of course, I lied and told them that I was excited, but I was scared. I was scared to death. But I knew that with the fear of possible failure, there was a counter fear. And the counter fear was something that I like to think of as the future you exercise. So if you're so fortunate and you make it to your golden years and you look back on your life, how will you feel if you don't even try and don't know what's possible? There's a fear for me of not knowing what's possible. Yeah, there's a fear of failure. Of course there is. It's normal. But then there's that other counter fear of not knowing just how wildly successful that I could have been, how happy, productive, and successful my life could have been, consistent with my goals and dreams. And for me, that was the fear that I feared the most, the fear of not knowing how good my life could have been because I didn't even have the courage to take that first step. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is to think about the counter fears and to do that future you exercise, to think about which fear can future you live with.
That's some great wisdom from you, Chad. We really appreciate you sharing that with everybody, and appreciate you coming on the podcast today to speak with us and tell us about your story. It's fascinating.
And I want to bring a little modification into, Andrew, you said about overpowering fear. And to me, it's about embracing. I think overpowering takes us back to hierarchy. And that's the way we often look at it, is we have to have power over. And I think what Chad has really talked about, and we're really bringing back home, is that idea of power with our emotions, power with our attitudes and beliefs, power with people. And that's an interdependence that even the person who is our biggest challenge or obstacle or hardest on us, like Chad brought out about his dad loved him enough to make life hard on him. The universe loves us enough to make life hard on us, not to beat us down, but to help to shape us in who we can be. And that's, again, great. Man, dude, you always blow my mind just to hear your stories and know you as a person and to see the soul and spirit that you have. So it's been great to have you on the show. Appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure. Man. Happy to do it again anytime. Let me know, man. Always good connecting with you guys.
Great to meet you, Chad. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, Andrew. Thank you, brother.
All right, Dr. E. What a way to start. What a way to start our 2025 series of shows here.
Wow. Yeah, indeed. I love that dude. He's an amazing soul. Yeah. So great to be with you, Andrew. I always appreciate it. It's been and I look forward to what 2025 is going to bring us as well. So until next time.